Welcome to the School Leaders Podcast. My name is Dr. Gastard Harrigan, the podcast for current and emerging school leaders, those who support and supervise them. You will hear from passionate educational leaders who are transforming their schools, communities, and creating positive outcomes for students. I will also share my personal reflections and tips from over 15 years as a school leader. Together, we will talk about how to level up our schools and leadership practices. Hello, welcome to the School Leaders Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Gastard Harrigan. In today's podcast, I want to share some of the lessons learned during my first year as a principal. My hope is that you will glean one or two tips to apply to your leadership repertoire. For some of you, it might just be a reminder of some of the things you have done or lessons during your first few years. How was your first few years as a principal, by the way? Think and reflect on that. What were some of the things that kept you up at night? I know I had several things that kept me up at night. What were some of the challenges and issues you faced? And reflecting back, what would be your top 5 lessons learned? So, stay tuned as I share some of my lessons learned and challenges during my first few years as a school principal. You got the keys. Now what? By the time I was named a new principal, I was tagged in the local newspaper talking about the bullying complaints, the challenges, the issues that were facing the school. After I was approved by the board, I came to find out that within 5 months, 2 veteran principals were forced to retire. And the third one that was holding, who was the current principal, was just holding the position, waiting for me to be approved to take over. So, on my first day on the job, I found out that I had a lot of union grievances, state and local investigation waiting for me to address. I don't know about you, but it was very frightening. I had inner fightings. Teachers and staff were passing each other literally in the hallway and not talking to each other. My first day on the job after I got my keys, I showed up to the school. And within a few hours, one of my assistant principals came in and says, "Today is my last day and I am retiring effective today." And within 2 months, my second and last AP, he decided to also retire. So now I'm a new principal, 2 months into the job, and I have no assistant principals. And I'm dealing with state, local investigations and union grievances that I needed to address. A lot of inner fightings and challenges that the school was facing. So obviously we had a negative, toxic school culture. So how did we move from that to where we are today? It is a great place to work. Student achievement is at its highest. We have an effective school grade rating with the state. We moved from about 10% graduation to over 89% in our graduation rate. We have over $600,000 in grants and partnership where students are completing paid internships and on-the-job training with partnership with our local city government and other local businesses in the community. Oh, by the way, we are also Florida PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Model School. So we are a positive behavior and intervention model school. In this podcast, I will share some of the strategies, some of the lessons that I learned during my first few years as a principle. And my hope is that you will glean 1 or 2 things that you can apply today to your leadership repertoire, to some of the strategies and techniques that you're implementing to hopefully see similar results. So one of the first lessons I learned on the job is that relationship matters. Let me say this again. Relationship matters. In fact, Robin says that building relational trust is critical to moving a school forward and accomplishing the instructional agenda. So you've heard this says before, right? In real estate, they usually say it's all about it's location, location, location. In leadership, it is about relationship, relationship, and relationship. So what were some of the things that I did? Obviously, part of building that relationship was that I went about beginning to meet with staff. I had an open door policy. I set time to meet with each and every one of my staff, from the custodian, the clerical team, the support staff around the office, supporting students and teachers. And I met with every teacher. So I met with everyone in the building. I wanted to get to know them, wanted to get to know about themselves, their families, kids, their dreams, their hope. Also, from their perspective, what were some of the challenges the school had, areas they feel or ways they think we could tackle and address some of the problems that we had. One of the other things I did, obviously, was to be highly visible around the school to make sure that, I was there during dismissal, during intake in the morning, during transitions. So that way I was highly visible throughout the school, building relationship also with students, building relationship with staff, getting to know parents in the morning, setting up and meeting different stakeholders, bringing them in and sharing and hearing from them areas of concerns and ways we can improve. And really, at the end of the day, was for me to get to know the community, begin to build that relationship with my staff. It is all about relationship. In fact, Michael Fullen, in his book, Leading in a Culture of Change, make it clear that leaders must be consummate relationship builders with diverse people and groups, especially with people that are different than themselves. So as a principal, as a school leader, we must be relationship builders. We must really take the time to build relationship with our staff. If you're a new principal, you're a new assistant principal, you're a new team leader, building relationship will get you further along your goals, your dreams, and some of the things that you would like to accomplish. The second lesson I learned as a new principal was that culture trump strategies. Culture trump strategy. In fact, culture eat strategies for breakfast. Culture eats strategies for breakfast. So you got to learn and get to know the culture of the school, both the formal and the informal culture of your school. I worked and brought the staff together, collaborated, had collaboration, discussions to really work at identifying some of our barriers, some of our challenges, and possible solutions. I'll talk about that later on during this podcast. But you really need to get to know, before you really work at changing the culture of your school, you really need to get to know the culture, the new school, of the new department that you are taking over, that you're inheriting. Some of the other ways I really got to know and begin to learn of some of the culture is what I call at the time chew and chat, breaking bread. In other words, I set up different times throughout my first year where I invite staff, I invite teachers to come and eat. I paid for the food. I invite them to come eat, to come break bread with me, for me to get to know them. I really had two simple rules for my chew and chat. And rule number one was simply this: you have to eat, right? Even if it's salad, if you're just gonna drink get some water, coffee, you gotta eat. And rule number two was, we are not gonna talk about any issues in the school, any student issues, any problems. This was a time for us to eat, and this was a time for me to get to know you as a person, get to know you in terms of your dreams, your goal, your family. Do you have kids? What do you do in your spare time? It was really for me to really, from lesson number one, which is to build relationship, but really through that to begin to learn and identify and work with my staff and begin to work on that culture of that school. It's very also important that you teach the culture that you want. Often we want something, but we do not teach it. We have to teach, model, as school leaders, we have to teach, model the behaviors, the values, the what we really want to see as that new culture. Because again, you're not going to change every culture in the school, or every routine, everything that the school traditions, some stuff you should leave alone. And that's part also of knowing what to change and what not to change. But by building relationship, by getting to know staff, you're beginning to build the building rock. So culture really trumps strategy. In fact, Brewer and Whitaker states that a leader must dig deeper into the psyche of your school and determine why certain behaviors are entrenched. And the only way you're going to get to know that is to really begin to talk to people, get visible, learn things, ask questions. Really, during that time, you are listening more than you are sharing. You are really listening to them, letting them share their concerns, share why they do certain things, why certain things are the way they are. So culture trump strategy. Lesson number 3 that I learned as a new principal on the job was that you got to set high expectation, establish your vision, focus areas. I said a lot in that. Set high expectation, set your vision, and really begin to work on identifying a few focus areas that's going to give you the greatest dividend. The way I did that aspect was really to bring staff together over several days. I brought school-wide, everyone was involved, including the custodian, including the clerical team. Everyone was involved, and we got together. And the whole idea and the whole goal was for us to be in one room beginning to discuss our challenge. So I broke the staff into small groups, and we begin to identify our challenges, the issues and possible solutions to each different challenge that ways they felt we could address those specific problems. Now, one of my big pet peeves is that everybody can identify a problem. One of the things I spoke about is if you identify a problem, you need to share one or two ideas of ways we could address, solve, possible solution to that specific challenge, to that specific problem. So that's one of my pet peeves. So while they write and walk around the room and write down the problems, the challenges, they also had to write possible solution. That doesn't mean that we're going to implement every idea, every possible solutions, but at least you are thinking about ways to address that concern. Second, once we met as a large group, the next thing I did was, I brought together a small group of leaders. So it comprised of team leaders, department chairs, formal and informal leaders, including the union rep, to now as a small group, take all that information, take all that data, take all that chart that as a staff shared, and then synthesize that information, break that information into digestible bites, into small focus areas, and then synthesize that. And so that small group, their task was to synthesize what the staff had said that were the challenges, that were the issues, that were the problems, and also, of course, the possible solutions, ideas, their dreams for the school, their areas that they think we should do. So once that small group identified and work on that, they obviously shared that with me. And then I took that and I pushed it back out to the entire staff. So I brought the staff back together. First, I emailed it to the staff for them to digest. Then I brought them back together and further took additional feedback, because what I wanted to tell them, listen, you told us a lot of stuff. Your peers synthesized all that stuff. You said, is there anything we missed? And we took additional feedback, right? They shared additional stuff and we added to that. And together as a staff, we begin now to pull out of that our visions, our mission, and 2 to 4 focus areas that together we can't solve all the problems, right, in the school. When you inherit a school or a department, there's going to be tons of challenges. So, I work with I work with the staff to really identify and identify really 2, 3, or maybe 4 focus areas that the next 2 to 3 years we're going to give our complete energy to addressing. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some heavy lifting. But these are the things that together as a group, we say are the major, what I call at the time, the big rocks that we wanted to address. And we were going to do it together as a staff. So together, we pull out our vision. Where do we see? What do we want to become? So today, when I say we were a premier center, obviously back then that was not the term, but the term was, out of that was our vision was to create a school where not only we meet students, students were academically challenged and prepared for college, but we also wanted to ensure that our kids are career ready and that we provide a social, emotionally safe place, a trauma-informed, sensitive type of school, which later on today are some of the things that we are implementing, because out of that, we draw out our vision, our goal, and those three are focus areas. So once we identify those three focus areas, that became I like to say, my marching order. Okay, so together we work and identify these areas. It ended up being 4 areas because 2 areas were tied. So for us, it ended up being 4 focus areas, 4 big rocks that became my focus for the next 2 to 3 years. And that is very important, because later on, as we face different challenges, I would bring the staff back together or bring individually have conversations. Well, remember, this was the focus areas you talked about. We can't solve all the problem, but these are where we are putting our energy, our resources, so we can have the most impact. I like what John Maxwell said. John Maxwell once says that the success of a vision is determined by its ownership by both the leader and the people. Somebody need to hear this. The success of a vision is determined by its ownership by both the leader and the people. So the fact that they selected these areas, so they now were bought into it. So now I had buy-in from them because it was their vision. It was the areas that they said those were the big rocks. Those are the big areas that I needed to focus on. Other things that I did around setting expectations, visions, and focus areas was that I had what I call expectation memos. We had a lot of issues. Procedures were not being followed, hence why the bullying grievances, the state investigation. So I had expectation memos. So in other words, I met with each staff and I laid out my expectation based on their specific job, based on their specific role. So I call those expectation memos. So everyone for their specific job, for their specific role, had an expectation memo. So the reason being is I didn't want to hear 2 or 3 months later or a year later, 2 years later, you didn't know your job. You didn't know what my expectations was. So I met with each staff, put in a writing. These are my expectations based on your job, based on your role. Expectation memos laid out my expectation of how we're going to conduct business, of how we are going to do business moving forward. And obviously, one of the things I will stop here and says that you have to inspect what you expect by holding people accountable. As a leader, you got to hold people accountable. So once I met with you and set those expectations, periodically I would have inspection time where I go and ensure that what we say we're going to do, the direction we are moving into, we all were in the same boat. We all were doing our specific job, all roles based on the expectation that was set. Now, by year 2 and year 3, I begin to have, really by the end of my first year, but really by the second and third year, I begin to have courageous conversations. And what was those? Those conversations were conversations I was having with people that, at the end of the day, they were not getting on board. They were on the fence, and some of them were still outright negative. And so I began to pull them in one by one and say, hey, listen, this behavior is unacceptable. Why is it unacceptable? Because it does not align to our vision. It does not align to our mission. We sat down, we identified areas, we identified our vision, we identified where we were heading, and this specific behavior, this specific performance was not cutting it. We had those courageous conversations. And for some people, I outright told them, listen, either get on the bus or you have to get off the bus. I would either help you get off the bus or I will help you get on in a different bus. So you could either get my help and get on a different bus, which will be a different school, or I will stop and drop you off the bus, which means your position may disappear. And so I had honest conversation with people about, and one of the things that came out of those conversations that I still use today is I will tell people, listen, You're not going to agree with everything I'm going to do. You may not agree with the vision, even though you were part of the process. So take your talent. I highly encourage them to take their talent to South Beach. I'm in South Florida. So I used to say, take your talent to South Beach. And it was my way of saying, listen, take your talent to a better place, school, department, where, you can support that leader's vision. And it wasn't negative, it was positive, because you were taking your talent to South Beach to an area positive. But you got to have courageous conversation. If you are going to change the direction of your school, as a leader, you don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to treat people bad, but you have to have courageous conversations. And also, part of those conversations is I end up had to move people. They were on the bus, but they were on different seats. So some people you didn't get off the bus, but you were moved to a different seat because whatever job you were doing, maybe another job fit best your talent, your skills, your abilities. That's the lesson I learned. Set your expectations, set your vision, set your focus area, and those areas that will give you the what I call the big rocks, your bang for your money. So lesson number 3 is really set high expectations, set your vision, and focus area. Thank you for joining me today. Please consider subscribing to the podcast, leave a 5-star rating and a comment, share this episode with a friend, and on social media. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for leadership ideas and tips. Again, thank you for joining me today. Until next time.